Hi everyone, this is Tim Guy again here to talk about my project I did on the infiltration and runoff. So first off, some of the standards I looked up, I went on the PA Environment and Ecology standards, and these are the four that I found. There was even probably some more that could have applied, but these are the four main ones that I focused on. Being able to analyze some soil types and how they impact agriculture in Pennsylvania, use some best management practices to mitigate environmental problems, describe how human activities affect the environment, and describe factors that affect the quality and ground surface of water. So I think that the last two really are the most important ones in terms of thinking about how the runoff is affecting what's going on and how we need to think about some of the problems that go on with that and how we can better treat those issues. So basically the first part was I went through and I looked at the simulations to try to figure out really what the problem is and what are some of the things we can do to try to fix it. And really the big thing I noticed was this spot right here, the high industrial or the high population areas where they're very developed, and those ones have the worst amount of runoff and the least amount of infiltration of the water. And so those are big issues because in major cities and major population centers, we obviously have a lot of problems with this runoff. We need to figure out a solution for that. So that's kind of how I developed the problem. So I'm trying to think about in my head, all right, well, what are some ways that we can make these cities better at treating runoff? And if you kind of go back to the previous slide, you can see that grass, I kind of included here, grass seems to have a really, really good job of not having runoff and infiltrating the water that is there. So I kind of said that, well, if grass is one of the best preventers of runoff, then we need to have grass insulating our higher developed areas and kind of around our cities and things. And so that's kind of my solution to the problem of what do we do with these high density, high developed areas and the runoff that's going on with them. So I went ahead and I came up with a plan. I came up with two runoff bottles from the models that we were shown. One of them only has highly developed area and the other one has the highly developed with some grass surrounding it. The highly developed area I was able to simulate by actually taking rubber from an old shoe. I kind of cut up an old shoe. It took me a little bit. Don't do that. It was pretty hard because I figured that kind of shows like asphalt and the different things that have a hard time letting that water penetrate. So I kind of took some soil and some of that rubber and kind of used that as my highly developed. And then the grass, I went into my backyard and kind of took up a patch of grass. I didn't have time to do the growing, so I kind of did that to do that. And then this is 1 cup of water. I actually changed it to a half a cup. The 1 cup, right before I went to go do it, got a little, it seemed like it was going to be too much, so I changed it to half a cup, and I left that overnight to do the runoff. So here's kind of a picture of what my setup looked like. Obviously, this is right before I took the caps off, poured the water in, and let it go. But if you take a look at this next slide, you can kind of see what the final product was, and you can see that the runoff from the grass was much clearer than from the just the developed area, and even beyond that, the developed area had way more water come through than the other one, so it kind of was an issue of both. So my hypothesis kind of was proven right, and the grass helped insulate it. In terms of what else is going on here, I tried to think about some ways I could improve my process or iterate on what I did, and so I thought about how I could have grown the grass instead of pulled it from my yard, and that might have given me some better results. The difference between wild grass and cultivated, if you think about outside a town center, just having like wild forests and grass might not be useful to the people that live there, while cultivated grass, being a little bit worse than runoff, might be more useful in terms of having a park or something that people can enjoy. I also kind of thought about wetlands was another kind of area that could be really good. I couldn't figure out how to kind of do cultivated grass, so I actually retried the experiment with the wetlands, and I went ahead and did that, and you can see there was like no water runoff after a night with the wetlands bottle. So I don't know if I just like got really good. What I did to do the wetlands was I just soaked the soil for about 5 or 6 hours beforehand, so it was kind of wet to start as opposed to dry like the other ones, and then did the experiment, and it really kind of stop the water from running off. Okay, so some of the connections amongst them from the book, I kind of highlighted a couple to kind of point out some things, but really the biggest things I saw were the science and engineering portions. The science developing models were kind of showing this is what it really kind of looks like when you have this runoff. And then engineering, I really had to define the problem here. It wasn't really given to me. It was like, hey, here's this runoff situation. What do you see? And, you can't just have a whole world here of grasslands. You have to have these developed areas for people to live in. And so we need to really figure out how we can go ahead and get rid of this runoff issue. So those are kind of the biggest connections. Obviously, the technology in the very beginning where we looked at the simulation, and some of the math is more like the reasoning abstractly and problem solving as opposed to really calculations, because there were no calculations here. But thank you for watching.